It's so bizarre.
What's more important, Lawrence, is not what he said, but is the fact that what he believes, and that is that women don't deserve access to birth control.
They're going to do everything in their power to just beat the drum of repression. I don't know what else to say.
Let me bring in Democratic Congresswoman Gwen of Wisconsin. Good morning, Congresswoman.
Good morning.
I don't know if you saw it, because we just saw it, but the Washington Post Neil Malika Henderson tweeted out a response by RNC Chairman Reince Priebus to what Mike Huckabee said. Quote, I don't know what he was talking about, sort of a goofy way of using some phrases, not the way I would have phrased it. And other Republicans are distancing themselves. I want to play some new reaction from the heads of the Tennessee and Mississippi Republican parties.
I wasn't offended by it, but my point was it's distracting.
I would not have talked about that. I'd talk about the economy.
Your reaction?
Well, let me say, Chris, it doesn't matter. Reince Priebus saying he wouldn't have said it that way. The point is that as I serve in Congress, we are dealing with trying to preserve a women's reproductive freedom every single day. I mean, just last year, in 22 states, there were over 70 anti-reproductive choice bills in states. And certainly, as we go back to Congress, next week we're going to be dealing with bills that, forbid women to, to get abortions, even if they use their own under the Affordable Care Act. Just let me say, it's really disappointing. I mean, you expect shock jocks like Rush Limbaugh to say stuff like this, but Reverend Governor, former presidential candidate, it is very alarming and is very threatening. And these ad hominem attacks against women they're not a gift to immigrants. They're a threat to women all over this country.
Well, when you talk, if I may, because you mentioned the attacks, I want to bring up a few other things that have been said. Just very recently, GOP Congressman Steve Pierce of New Mexico made headlines recently for his book where he says the wife is to voluntarily submit to her husband. Richard Black has dropped out of the congressional race in Virginia, but not before questioning whether marital rape should be a crime. And to be fair, in all of these cases, including yesterday, there are Republicans who have seriously questioned and even pushed back against these statements. So I guess the question has to be asked, are they really representative of the Republican Party as a whole?
Well, if they're not representative of the Republican Party as a whole, I'd like to see that reflected, in their platform, in the kind of legislation that they put forward. And comments like, I wouldn't have said it quite like that, means that you sort of agree with it, but you'd have thought of a different way to say it. Women are capable of becoming pregnant for 30, 40 years of their lives. And birth control is listed as one of the top 10 public health miracles of the 20th century. And to suggest that women are lewd and lascivious and can't control their libidos because they are being responsible in their reproductive choices, again, is extremely threatening, Chris.
Is it also in some ways, look, obviously there are people who share these opinions. I was looking at Cecile Richards, who came out in defense of Mike Huckabee. She's the head of Concerned Women for America, and she said, the president and others have profited politically from the false narrative that women are weak and need big government to be our savior. If you want to look at this in another light, is it good to get the debate out there? Because I think a lot of folks figured, yes, the abortion question was still out there, but birth control kind of still wasn't on the table, and it does seem to be, and maybe the debate needs to be out there. People need to understand what the questions are.
Well, you know, we had gotten to a point where even if you disagreed with a woman's right to choose an abortion, I mean, 99% of women of reproductive age have used birth control. It's the responsible thing and the healthy thing for women to do, not only for their own bodies, but for their families. And I wasn't quite sure, Chris, about that quote about Cecile Richards.
I'm sorry, it was Penny Nance, so let me just correct that.
I was about to say, it doesn't sound like the Cecile Richards that I know.
Penny Nance.
But you know, I think you would think that the narrative that Republicans have forwarded since Ronald Reagan, that you have these welfare queens that have 80 different addresses and so on and so forth. You would think that they would want to err on the side of a woman being responsible and not reproduce for the 40 years of the span of her reproductive capability. And I think that, again, you know, shock jock, Rich Limbaugh calling someone a slut is one thing. When you have Reverend Huckabee, it's a little bit more concerning to me and to many women out there. It is very exhausting to day in and day out to fight these battles. And it just goes to show that there is this sort of caveman perspective on women's role in our society.
Congresswoman Gwen Moore, always good to have you on the program. Thank you.
Great.